Hi, I'm Nick Rodriguez with the Squid Ink service team, and today we're going to be talking about setting up your Gemini print system. In today's example, we're going to be utilizing our conveyor mount bracket system that you see here in front of you, which mounts right to the side of the conveyor. What we're installing on today is one of our Eastie 6-foot conveyors. So we've got that set up here. We've got our nice conveyor mount system. We're also going to be mounting the printhead itself on this spring-loaded bracket, which helps maintain a pretty good print distance from the substrate. And we'll be obviously going ahead and using our Gemini controller here as well. So we'll kind of go through the steps about how to put it together, commission it, and do some prints. So what you'll see here on our controller, we do have a protection guard here for the ports in the front of it. That'll help, protect the USB port and the Ethernet and the inputs and outputs from the controller. So we've got that guard mounted here. We also have it mounted on our L bracket that's right on the arm itself. There are 2 screws, 2 bolts underneath the system. That's all it takes to mount that controller. So it's pretty straightforward when you go ahead and do that installation. The next step we're going to do is mount the printhead onto the spring-loaded bracket, and then we'll go through the flushing and commissioning. So before we get started mounting that printhead, I kind of want to point out what you're going to see on your spring-loaded bracket here. This plate is going to have 2 sets of pilot holes here for your screws to mount to the bottom of the printhead. This is in case you have to change your orientation. Right now it's set up for a right to left orientation. It can be set up in a way where it goes left to right as well, and you will need to use the other set of screws there. So what we're going to do here is we're going to mount our printhead. We kind of already started 1 screw at the front here. You are going to have to mount it from the bottom of it, so that's why we have our printhead raised so high in relation to what we're going to be printing on. So I go ahead and build the bracket, lift up the printhead arm bar here, and I'm going to go down here and go ahead and install my screws and fasten them on there. Again, you'll just want to keep in mind that there are 2 sets of screw holes here. Right now we're using the one closer to the arm side. That's pretty much the rule of thumb when doing this install here. So I want to line everything up, and we'll go ahead and tighten that down. What I'm using to tighten these bolts down or these screws down is a number 2 Phillips. So we just want to make sure we're nice and snug. You don't want to over tighten and destroy those threads. So that looks pretty good there. The system works as intended here with that slight bounce. So yeah, let's go ahead and hook it up to the controller now. Now that we have our printhead mounted, our controller mounted, the next step is to go ahead and connect our data cables. Now, what you'll see is on the back of the controller, you're going to see a printhead 1 and a printhead 2 listed on there. That's going to be important because we're going to need to match that up to the back side of the Gemini printhead on the other end of those cables, which you will also see a printhead 1 and printhead 2 here. So very important, make sure you connect 1 to 1 and 2 to 2. So what we'll do here is I'm just going to match up my lines real quick. Grab this. Yep, and we'll go hook up to printhead 2 right there. Tighten down that and tighten down that as well. It's very important to do this step when the power's off. We don't want to be hot plugging in things or unplugging them when the system has power. So if you might have already noticed, we already have our Photocell bracket mounted here off to the side. When you get a Gemini system, it's going to come with several different mounting options for your Photocell. We can mount directly to this spring-loaded bracket here or onto the side of the printhead with them if needed. So the bracket here makes it pretty simple. Go ahead and line up the screws, mount it there. This also gives you a good enough distance from this trigger to the printhead for lots of variable data, messages, and stuff like that. So that is mounted there. What we're going to do is, since the Photocell is already installed, we're going to have to plug in both our photocell and our encoder, which is what we're going to be using to detect the speed of the conveyor. We're going to plug that into our Y splitter that we have already mounted on our controller. So when we're using these Y splitters, you'll see channel A, channel B. It doesn't matter which side you plug it into. Both can be used. You can use them interchangeably. So, you know, photocell doesn't have to go into one or the other. And what you want to do is just go ahead and mount that in there. You get that nice snap. Make sure everything's nice and snug. I'm going to do the same thing on the controller and make sure that that's mounted good. Our encoder is already mounted below the conveyor. So at this point, we are ready to go ahead, turn on the system, and get it flushed out. So now that we have everything mounted, powered on, the next step for us is to go ahead and commission the printhead. Commissioning the printhead is a two-step process. The first step is going to be to flush the system out with whatever it has in it. That's a good idea for if you have a printhead that's been sitting in storage for a while, if you received the printhead back from either service, or if you're going ahead and installing a brand new printhead. It's always a good idea to go ahead and run a little bit of flush through the system, internal cleaner, to get all that shipping fluid out of the ink manifold and the print engines, so that you know that you're dealing with good quality fluids when it comes to print time. So what you need in order to get there is you're going to need to have your printhead, obviously, some sort of a catch tray or a beaker that we're going to use to catch the ink to come out of the back drain tubes, which we'll see in a minute. And you're going to also want to have some sort of a cleaner. Today we are utilizing oil-based ink, so we are going to have this oil-based internal flush. You'll go ahead and see that right there on the cartridge. This is the cleaner that we use for our oil-based system, so 1043. It's safe to go inside of the system and on the print engines themselves. So like I said, we've got everything on here. I'm going to go ahead and move around to the side, install this cartridge. And what you want to do is you want to start from the top. Make sure that that's nice and seated up here. Go ahead and push the back until it snaps into place. You should see a pretty smooth transition from the two pieces of the squid here. That's a good seated cartridge. That's very important. We want to make sure that snaps in. If it doesn't snap in, you may see that you have some pooling of ink or fluid down here, and we don't want to do that. So with our cartridge in place, we can go ahead and start flushing the unit out using the drain tubes at the back of the print system. All right, so here we go. I've got my catch beacon. What you'll notice at the back of the printhead is there are two drain tubes. Now, the CoPilot Gemini is basically two CoPilot Max print systems combined into one printhead. So the process of purging is going to be from both tubes and then both engines in the front. So right now what we'll do is step one, flushing out of the print engines or the ink manifolds. I'm going to take my tube from printhead 1. That's going to be the printhead that's on the top side of the printhead itself. I'm going to open that up, and then I'm going to go ahead and put my beaker underneath there and press and hold the purge button. Now this head has been used for printing and whatnot, so it's got a little bit of ink that's still in the system, but we're going to go ahead and flush it, give it a good clean finish here. Make sure that the ink line itself is good and ready to introduce some good ink into it. What we're looking for when we're flushing or commissioning, purging the head with ink or cleaner, is good solid streams. You'll see a couple of bubbles here and there. That's okay. You want to get all those out. That's why we're using the drain tubes. So the drain tube is the best way to evacuate any air that's in your system. You want to do that first before we get any of that ink in there. So this line is looking pretty good. We don't need it to be completely clear. So I'm going to say that the head one side is good. We'll stop that and I'll cap this line. We'll go on to the next side. So there's that. Cap that up. Now on to printhead 2 side. Just open that up. I like to have the catch tray ready just in case anything comes out. But again, open that up, go back to the purge button, and you press and hold is all we're doing. We're just holding it in place. And I'm keeping an eye on my stream to see how everything's going. So again, we're wanting to see a good solid stream of ink. Since we're flushing, I'm just going to go ahead and let that go. And we'll go ahead and cap this. Now the next step in completing our flush is to go ahead and flush out the front, cleaning out those print engines as well. So that's what we're going to do right now. So now that we're done flushing out the drain tubes, we're going to go ahead and continue that process out the engines. What you want to keep in mind when you're doing anything out of the front of the print head is you're going to want to make sure you're using the lint-free, non-abrasive wipes that we provide with the system. We can get you that part number so you know what you're looking for, but you're going to want to make sure anytime you're going to make any sort of contact to the face of this print head that you're using one of those wipes. The reason being is we don't want to create any damage to the nozzles. We're dealing with really small dots, so any sort of nicks, dents, or scratches around them or buildup can really affect the print quality. And the best way to avoid that is to use lint-free wipes. So what I'm going to do for this process, since we're going to purge out the front of the print head, is I'm going to take one of these and I'm just going to fold it into place underneath my print head here. We will be purging out the front of the print engines. We want to make sure that we catch some of that ink that we'll miss with our other lint-free wipe. So I go ahead and put a little curtain there. And then you're going to want to have more on hand as well. So let's kind of go back to the back of the print head and discuss a couple of things that are there. You may have noticed that right above the purge tubes are two buttons here. Those buttons are the print engine isolation valves. And their main function is to help you prime and purge up your print head by using as little ink as possible. So what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to purge the print engines in order, print engine 1 and print engine 2. And we're going to isolate the other print engine so that no ink will flow to that. So just to explain a little bit, if I want all my fluid to go out of print engine 1, I will press the purge button and this isolation button underneath print engine 1. This isolator will cut off any flow of ink to the second print engine so that all my flow is going right out into the print engine on the top and vice versa. So if I want to have my fluid come out of print engine 2 and not print engine 1, I'll go ahead and press this button while also pressing the purge button. And again, that'll isolate the opposite head, cutting off any flow to that head so that you are utilizing as little ink or fluid as possible in purging. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start this off. I'm going to go ahead and start us off. I'm going to press, use my thumb to press the purge button, and then with my middle finger here, I'm going to go ahead and press that isolator button. So real quick, I'm going to press the purge, and the isolator goes in like that. And here's what you should be seeing. Should be seeing some good flow coming out of that print engine. Notice that I'm catching the ink and the flush at this example out on a rag here. Once you see good flow and no more bubbles coming at the top, you can go ahead and release. There's no reason to keep that going if there's no bubbles. So the main thing to look for there is to see that you get the fluid go from the bottom of the print engine all the way up to the top. Once it's there and no more bubbles are coming, you can go ahead and release that. So I'm going to go wipe this up. Also, a good tip to keep in mind is if you are going to wipe the print head, always wipe in one direction. We don't want to be wiping back and forth, creating friction possibly on that nozzle plate. So now that we've done print engine 1, we'll move down to print engine 2. So again, I'm going to use my thumb to press the purge button up top and my middle finger here to hit that isolator underneath print engine 2, and that'll cut off any flow going to my second or my top print engine. So there it is. You see that flow going, and Yeah, right when there's no more air bubbles, we'll go ahead and release. There, good. So there, we'll just make sure that that's cleaned up. Make sure that this is cleaned up. So that concludes the flushing aspect of the commissioning. The next step will then be to eliminate all that flush fluid and then go ahead and add your ink that you're going to use. So for draining the printhead, now we don't want to dilute our ink that we're going to put into it. So we're going to want to evacuate all that cleaner that we just used to clean out our engine and our ink manifolds, or manifold, I should say. What we'll do is we're just going to remove our cleaner from the back of the printhead. And again, that should just pop back out like that. You can use that thumb indentation there to kind of pull up. Pry that out of the way. And with nothing here, I'm going to go ahead and open up my drain tubes and drain out all that fluid that we added in there. Now, for this stage, it's good enough to just go out the drain tubes for the flush here, or the drain. We don't need to necessarily go out of the print engines at this point either. So I'm going to go ahead and press and hold. You can see that nice clear flush fluid evacuating. And you'll see some more ink come out of this as well when you're doing this. It's just the flush doing its job, cleaning everything as it goes. And that should be good enough. So you can see my ink line here, the drain line, is full of air bubbles. That means that this route, this section of the ink system, is mostly cleared out. So we'll go ahead and cap this line. And then we'll follow it up with the second side. Now that second side will probably be done quicker than that first side. That's just because the fluid has a lot less travel when you're going out of that second printhead circuit there. So not as much ink line to travel through. That looks good, so we'll go ahead and cap that. And with that all capped up and flushed out, we can go ahead and add our ink. All right, so ready to get it inked up. I got myself a cartridge of PZ1060 ink. That's our oil-based ink for the Max 512 and the Gemini system. We'll go ahead and take that out of the bag. Treat it exactly the same way as we did the cleaner when we installed that. So I go ahead, start that at the top. Make sure this is all in there and go ahead and push in until you get that satisfying snap. Now that that's in place, we can go ahead and fill our ink system with our actual ink. So we'll go down to the back of the printhead again, and I always like to start at printhead 1. So I open up my line, hold that there, and I'm going to go ahead and press and hold on the purge button like we've been doing this whole time. And you'll see that, anytime you're first commissioning a printhead, filling it with fluid, whether it's ink or cleaner, it could take up to about a minute to fully fill the entire ink system. So if you're in a situation where you don't think anything's happening at the beginning, just hold that a little bit longer. A little bit of patience at the front end of this is good. Once you fill that ink system, then you won't really have to worry about waiting that long again once you get it primed up. So at this stage, it is very, very important to be paying attention to the ink line and making sure that we get as much of the air bubbles out of the system as we can. We did put a lot in there from draining all that cleaner fluid out, so we want to make sure we get as much of that out as possible. Again, the best way to do that is out the drain tubes like we're doing right now. That to me looks pretty good. Small hiccups like that are normal. That's the interchanging of the two stepper motors that pull the ink from the ink cartridge. So that small little hiccup right there, that's normal to see there. We'll cap that one up real quick. And this is, again, the first time you purge it and fill it up, it'll take a little bit longer. It may seem like you're using a little bit of ink, but it's going to help you on the long run to take your time in this step and really get all the air out so that you don't have issues while you're printing. Pretty good stream there. Since we got a lot of the air out during the first side on printhead 1, you know, you might see that printhead 2 takes a little bit shorter, and that's normal. That's a-okay. Right there, that looks pretty good. Small little exchange of the steppers. I'm going to say that that looks good for me. So we'll release. A little air bubble there. And we'll go ahead and cap this and continue the process out of the engines. With as much as the air out of the system as we can get out the drain tubes, now we'll go ahead and fill our inks, our print engines. Again, I like to start at print engine 1, fill this all up, and then work my way down to print engine 2. So what I'll do here is we'll use my thumb pressing on the purge button and middle finger pressing on the isolator so that no flow is going to my second print engine. I want all the flow to come out the top. So here we go. I'm going to press my isolator in and engage the stepper motor. With that done, you can see that ink flow all the way up the top of that print engine, just like that. And I'm just making sure that all the ink is coming out. That looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and release it. All right, so you can be quick with that release once you see a good stream of ink come all the way down. Once the ink doesn't look chunky anymore, like they say, that means there's no air bubbles in there. So that's good. I'll get my lint-free wipe ready for the second print engine. Again, thumb on the purge button, middle finger on the isolator. And that should go pretty quickly. Yep. And that looks like it's ready. Very good. I'll clean that up with my lint-free here. Again, taking care to try to avoid rubbing the actual laminate on the print engine itself. And we can go ahead and see what this thing looks like on our test prints. Now that everything's primed up, we're cleaned up, we can go ahead and test print our Gemini printhead. And what we're doing when we're test printing our printhead at this stage is we're just going to make sure that everything looks good, that the two print engines are stitching together nicely, and that our print looks like one nice cohesive run. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and turn on our conveyor and let our box go through. That looks pretty good. So we went ahead and test printed our product. It looks great. But what I want to go ahead and do is show you guys if the print engines, you know, the top and bottom print heads don't look like they're matching up or lining up for you on your application, we can go ahead and adjust that electronically off the controller. So if you want to come over here and take a look at what we've got, right here you're looking at the home screen for our controller. In order to get to the stitching that we call it, we're going to go to our gear icon here, and you'll need to access the second page. And this button right there, that'll bring you to your stitching menu, where it's labeled head spacing. So you can go ahead and adjust your vertical and horizontal position to a point where you know, you don't have any lines or gaps in your prints, and everything looks like one solid image. So right, what you can see here is we made a couple adjustments on our vertical side of things, but our horizontal spacing we left at 0. When you're using an encoder and you're flat on a conveyor like this, you're probably going to start at zeros and then move by increments of 1 is how I would recommend doing it. This is going to be moving things by jet count, so it's going to move it over by a couple of jets or move it up or down by a couple of jets. So that's how you go ahead and adjust that if you are not happy with your head spacing. Otherwise, like we did today, we're looking pretty good, so we'll go ahead and move on, which is build messages and whatnot for the application that it's being installed for. So since we're on the subject of looking at what's on the controller itself, I feel like it's a good time to kind of point out when you do need to change out your ink cartridge after you've used it. There's a couple of steps that you can go ahead and do on the controller that'll maintain this ink bar to be accurate, right? So whenever this bar goes down to red, telling you that it needs to be replaced, You can go ahead and do it two ways. One is stop the line, replace the cartridge, and go on with your life. Or second is to go in here and utilize the cartridge reset right here and this button. So if the line is actively running and you don't want to stop your production, you can go ahead and hit this max button. And you're going to use this cartridge swap feature. So what this does is I'm going to go ahead and hit that. It gives you about 30 seconds. It's a timing of how much ink it has left in the print engines. You can remove your cartridge, put your new cartridge in there. Once you've done that, go ahead and hit the page again, and it'll release the system, and it goes right back into printing. Now, after you do that, you still have to go here and reset your ink level. You want to make sure that you tell it that you did replace the cartridge so that it can start subtracting the print quantity from a new cartridge level. So always very important. Anytime you switch out a cartridge, you need to replace, or when you replace the cartridge, you need to go in here and hit that ink level reset. If you don't want to stop your production, you can go over here and hit that cartridge swap button before you replace the cartridge too. So a couple of tips to have on hand as you are running production with our system. So that was our video on the CoPilot Gemini print system. Again, 2 engines giving you 5.6 inches of printable height. A great option for label replacements or to as an alternative for pre-printed boxes. I hope you found this video useful. I'm Nick Rodriguez with the Squid Ink service team. Go ahead and look for us elsewhere on the web or on YouTube. Thanks.